Hello physics students. This video is an introduction to the Walk the Graph lab that you will be performing in class. This is meant to be just a short introduction to the equipment you're going to be using and a little bit about the goal of the lab. What we want you to do is make sure that you please print out the Walk the Graph lab before you begin this video. So if you haven't read the lab yet, please pause the video and download the entire lab document from your teacher's webpage.
If you don't do that, you will not understand what Mr. Dillick and I are about to tell you. So stop the video right now, just minimize it, go to our teacher pages and print out the Walk the Graph lab handout off of our teacher pages. Read through all the setup and then come back here so you can actually see, okay, so this is what we're going to do with that lab handout that you just read about. Okay, so pause right now, guys. Go do that. Come back to us here in a few minutes.
If you're still watching this video, then you've read the lab, so we just want to give you an introduction to the equipment you're going to be using. You're going to be using a handheld data-taking device called the LabQuest. Now the LabQuest can facilitate a lot of different attachments. The one we're going to be using in this experiment is called a motion detector. Now essentially what you're going to be doing, you're going to be responsible for turning on the handheld and attaching the motion detector. There's usually through some sort of USB port, or in this case, you're going to actually be using some ports that are designed to specifically attach to the motion detector. There's a couple ports and you could get confused. On the back, you're going to see, or on the top of the LabQuest, you're going to see channels like you see here in the video. You actually want to look on the right side of the LabQuest and look for a specific port called DIG1, which stands for Digital 1. It's a digital port and it must be used with the motion detector. You're also going to use a meter stick and maybe some tape. You're going to be using this to measure your motion and hold the LabQuest to take real-time data as you move.
Okay, so a couple of things about that. There's also a lanyard that is attached to your LabQuest. The LabQuest are also numbered, so you will sign out a LabQuest with your teacher and you will also be wearing the lanyard the whole time. If you drop one of these, it's a couple $100, guys. So please make sure you have the lanyards on it the whole time. There's a stylus that is stuck into the back of it. Right here is the stylus, so you can pull that out to turn the power on, to change from graphs to data tables to whatever. Also, don't get too terribly hung up on is it a channel or is it a digital port, because this USB will only fit into one or the other. So it's definitely going to be the DIG on the right-hand side that you want to look for. All right.
You're going to be using the stylus to do a touch screen interface. So if you're missing a stylus, you can still use the equipment,
sure.
But you're going to have to use a fingernail or you're going to have to use your finger to
yes.
touch it. Please let us know if you're missing that part.
And please do not use pens, because that pen mark will stay onto the screen. Do not use writing implements. Use your finger, use a fingernail, use something, but please do not use like the tips of pens and pencils.
So as we mentioned, you're going to actually be holding the device and you're going to be holding the motion detector and the LabQuest in your hand at the same time. And you're going to need to, probably in the hallway, find a wall that you can bounce the sound coming from the motion detector off of. When you have it set up, when you actually have the motion detector working, it'll make a clicking noise. And that clicking noise is sending out sound. It's bouncing off a flat surface and returning to the motion detector. It then measures the change in the rate at which that sound is bouncing off the surface and computes for you and the readout is for you right there on your handheld LabQuest about what your motion is. This could be in the form of data that's just numbers in a data table, or it could be a graph depending on what you ask to see.
Okay, one thing that I would like to point out about this is you are going to be consistent with your data. You are going to be holding the LabQuest the whole time. One of your other lab partners is going to be like giving you directions. For instance, what I'm trying to make here, guys, is this person's looking down. If you look down, your LabQuest is going to be looking down. And that's going to give you inaccurate data as you are walking. So whomever's holding the LabQuest, look at the wall and walk towards the wall. Your classmate will tell you, or your lab partner will tell you, okay, stop, okay, go backwards, okay, move faster. So that's someone's job. Make sure that you guys decide whomever's job is holding the LabQuest, whoever's job is recording the data, etc., etc. But consistency rules.
You also want to make sure that your motion is pretty smooth. I recommend that rather than taking large steps and causing your motion detector to be jolted as you step, that you kind of shuffle your feet. That's going to be better for smoother data. After you try it a couple times, I'm sure you'll have it.
Absolutely.
Once you actually are able to view the LabQuest data, you'll be able to see that, again, using a stylus, you'll have touch screen options where you'll be able to open files, find lab instructions, and even adjust your sensor readouts. All of this can be done right through the handheld LabQuest interface, and pretty much it's pretty user-friendly. If at any time you have some questions about where you're going to look for certain information on the screen itself, don't hesitate to ask your teacher. But be aware that we're going to be moving around through the hallway with several different groups, so show some patience. You will have several days to do this experiment, so you want to make sure that you're patient, but that you're asking for help if you need it. You can see here that there's several different tabs that you're going to be using pretty regularly. One of them is the File tab, which is going to allow you to open files. It does give you an option to save files, but we really don't want you saving to the LabQuest. But this is where you will look for your lab instructions in a digital form, and this is also where you'll be able to quit out of one lab and open another one. You'll also be able to calibrate sensors under the Sensor tab and ensure that your LabQuest is reading that you do have a motion detector attached to it.
Which is the first thing you want to do anyways, because if you don't start off by clicking File, clicking on your sensors, and looking for motion detector, then it won't sense the motion detector at all. So if you're not hearing that clicking as soon as you do put the USB into DIG1, then you definitely want to go to the sensors option here, and you want to click onto motion detector so that you know that the system is actually reading the motion detector. So then after that, you would click on either the data table icon or the graph icon. Now this is after you have taken data. All you have to do is this button right here, just push on that and it'll immediately start taking data for you. And you have set up, like you can see right here, for 10 seconds it's going to be taking data. So you don't have to hit like stop or anything on that. There's also an actual manual button about down here on your LabQuest where you can push that if your stylus isn't working for some reason for it to start to collect data.
Once you actually generate this data, one of the types of data that we're going to be particularly interested in is the graph. And so we've given you a graphic here of what kind of graph information you're going to be taking. You might be producing a position time graph, in which case the actual motion that you're producing the LabQuest will actually produce that graph for you as you move. We're also going to be looking at velocity time data, which is a little trickier. And in addition to producing these graphs from your motion, you will also be given some options to try and match existing graphs with your motion. So you're going to need to have some comfortable interface with the graph option. It's the most important of the options that we're going to be looking at for the purposes of this lab.
Yes, agreed.
What kind of things are we going to be asking you for? Well, in the end, what we're going to want to know is that you actually physically created these graphs and that you could describe the motion that you're seeing in a graph based on what you physically did. So you should be able to look at a graph you produced like this velocity time graph and say, at point A, what was I doing? At point B, and point C, and point D, what kind of motion, what kind of actions was I taking to produce this graph? In addition to that, you may be asked to do that for a position time graph as well as a velocity time graph. And you need to really, what we're looking for here, the goal of this lab is for you to get a physical sense of what kind of actions it took for you to actually produce these motions. As long as you're able to do that, you should have no difficulty answering the questions that you see in the lab. But I do want to point out that the graphs that you see, that these graphs are very similar to what you see in your printout, and you're going to have to transfer any graph that you actually produce on the LabQuest by hand. You're going to want to sketch that graph into your data report.
Yeah, and also it shows you guys have printed out at this time, once you've read through those instructions, it'll show you like a space where there is graphing paper provided for each of the sections. It's completely user-friendly. So really what we want you to do is, after you've read through this whole entire lab, you will see at the very beginning that there were, I think, about 3 preliminary questions on this lab handout. Yeah, they're about sketch a quick graph of this, that, and the other thing, and you really haven't been there yet, but once again, it's a pre-lab question. Also, please make sure you bring this lab handout with you to class on Monday, and also your closed-toed shoes. Be proactive with lab safety. And also, if you have any questions, Mr. Dillick and I are asking that you come prepared with those questions at the very, very, very beginning of class. We really want you to maximize your time Monday in the lab. Also, the intent is that you can walk into class ready to go. That is all I would like to say.
That's it. We hope that you have a great weekend, and we look forward to doing this lab with you soon.